All right, everybody. I think everybody's here. Hello. Um, I met most of you, but my name is John Brannon, and I am the Cemetery Information and Events Coordinator. It's kind of a weird name.
For this particular cemetery?
For all of City of Savannah cemeteries.
Oh, wow.
So, City of Savannah has 5 municipal cemeteries. There's the Colonial Park downtown. Started in 1750 and was there until about 1852 when it finally filled up. The city then expanded and built Laurel Grove, today Laurel Grove North and South. Later, in 1907, they bought Bonaventure Cemetery from a private company. And then in the 1930s, they also added Greenwich Cemetery. So we have over about 150,000 burials in all of our cemeteries. So, an event coordinator, that's because we get so many visitors. Literally hundreds of thousands of visitors to City of Savannah cemeteries. Mostly Bonaventure and Colonial, but the others have visitors too. Not only tours, but also movies, TV shows want to film here, and even about 50 weddings a year.
Oh, wow.
So that's what I handle. I was given a chance to work with Massey Heritage Center to create a tour of Laurel Grove South. And Laurel Grove South is a cemetery that just doesn't get as much attention as the others. And part of the reason is it's kind of tucked off. It's not as easy to see. In the 1960s, the I-16 connector from 37th Street just literally cut right through the cemetery, in between the two, basically segregating the two cemeteries forever. Laurel Grove North, when it started in 1853, was the white part of the cemetery. A little south of that, just on the fence line next to 37th Street connector, is a Jewish section of Laurel Grove North. But this is Laurel Grove South, and it's almost entirely an African American cemetery. Today there's about 54,000 people buried here. When I started the job, I realized that most of our records that we have are just vital information. Death certificates, interment orders, ledger books saying lot sales. What we didn't have a lot of is biographical information. So anytime I ever came across something, when I was working with a genealogist or a historian, and I found a biography or a photograph, I've been saving them. And I've got a couple 10 gigabytes of pictures now over 2 years. And I have a lot of pictures from Laurel Grove South. So the people that I've chosen on this tour are ones that, for the most part, I have a photograph of. We're going to pass a lot of people that are very interested, that we just won't have time for. But that's why you should come back on your own and even do your own research to find out. So I'm going to show you a few things. The first thing is a photograph from 1898, and this is from the Georgia Historical Society. And it shows a grave right here in Laurel Grove South Cemetery. So,
Wendy, I'm worried about your folder.
Oh, thank you. Here you go, Internet. This picture shows grave goods on top of a grave that's here. Now, this is a common practice, at least during that time, especially at Laurel Grove South. This shows pictures of pots and pans and tin pitchers, beer bottles, any sort of thing that might have been related to the person that's being buried there. This is a small collection of items that were found here at Laurel Grove South. Now, over time, those trinkets would get broken or were stolen or scattered. And so later, when a grave would be dug, they would be moved elsewhere. When you dig a grave and you put a casket in, you've got more dirt left over. That dirt goes to a back pile, and that's why these are here. I don't know the original location, so I can't return them. But what you see is bottles and even a piece of a clock, small statue of a little boy, a larger statue. These were the items that were left behind to memorialize the dead. And over time, they disappeared. So when you're looking out at the cemetery, there's a lot of empty space. Well, don't let that fool you. This place is very much full and very much, contained. So as we're walking, you will see some headstones, but realize that there are burials everywhere. Another way that you could memorialize is using these. These are cemetery tiles. They're often incorrectly called slave tiles, but more so they were really created on the Victorian era after the end of slavery. But these were a cheap alternative to mark out a grave. You can see them lining the edges there. Be careful when you see them in an antique store, or you see some old cast iron, for sale that looks kind of like a fence, because those things can often get stolen from cemeteries. Luckily, there's laws to protect, but people do take them. And this one was found right here in the cemetery, but it had lost its location, so now it's.
What's it made out of?
It's a hard ceramic, but it usually has various designs on it.
Okay.
And that was just one way that you could the grave. In the 1970s, whoa, in the 1970s, a local civil rights leader, postman, Wesley Wallace Law, W.W. Law, engaged in a campaign to renovate and restore a lot of Laurel Grove South. And so this is a picture here in 1970, probably 71, because the renovations took place in 1972. And it shows him standing in front of the graves of Reverend Andrew Bryan, Reverend Henry Cunningham, Reverend Andrew Marshall. This grave today is very much restored, but in the 1970s it was looking pretty rough. So there was a great campaign, and we will pass exactly by this later. That's kind of part of why we did this program. Massey Heritage Center, our partner in this, they have an exhibit called Go Down to Georgia, Go Down to Savannah, and that is part of the W.W. Law collection. It's photographs, music, various artifacts that the city of Savannah has in their archives of the W.W. Law collection that it has. So you should also go to that. Today we're going to be walking about a mile, and it might take about an hour and a half to 2 hours if you have to leave. I understand. But we're going to begin by heading down this road right here. If you'd like to walk, we're going to make that first right. I just have to put a few items up.
I have your folder, so I'll hang on to it.
You must be a teacher.
No, I'm a mom. I'm a mom.
Well, if you're a teacher, you're a mom, you're a teacher.
Yes.
I remember lots of teachers. Some of it was kind of like, you see this switch?
Take a picture. And drop you in the car, come get you. So the guy.
Like they have a lot of those fruit gum trees. Yes.
Tough to walk on them.
Oh, yeah. The other house, we moved from Jackson, but the other house we had, one of these fruit gum trees in the backyard, and we moved that, and a poor dog would always get caught.
His paws.
Yeah.
So there's something unique about this grave. In front of it is a little four-pointed star. It's a Confederate service star. And this cemetery is almost entirely African American, so that's kind of an unusual addition. The marker here says Old Tom, Born 1808, died 1904. This man was Thomas Williamson, and he was, in his early life, the first half of his life, the slave of the Wheaton family. When he was about 14 years old, a young boy was born into the family, John F. Wheaton, who later becomes the mayor of Savannah. He was also, before that, a member of the Chatham Artillery, and Thomas left and went to serve in the Confederate Army with him as a servant. So after the war, Confederate Service Star was placed here for him. But the mayor, John Wheaton, he died in 1898. So old Thomas here, died a few years later, and this stone was placed by the Wheaton family. And it's kind of an interesting thing that you sometimes see in the cemetery, because the relationships in the 19th century were very much complicated. There were slaves, there were nominal slaves, there were free people of color in the city of Savannah, there were abolitionists, and those friendships lasted even after emancipation in a case like this. So on Confederate Memorial Day, families that are usually in Laurel Grove North will often come over here and place flowers at the grave of Thomas. So it just kind of shows you that there's a lot more to the stories than just black and white. We're going to head down to see a reverend.
Yeah.
This is the grave of Pastor Daniel Wright. This photograph is part of the City of Savannah's WW Law collection. So I captured it because I knew that he was here in the cemetery. He was the pastor of First Bryan Baptist Church from 1908 until he died in 1923. He was also very popular. By the time he was pastor, there was over 4,000 members of his congregation that he preached to. He was the preacher at the funeral of a man named James Merrill Sims that we're going to be encountering a little later today. His grave is just across the cemetery. But he was also an early leader in civil rights. Civil rights in Savannah didn't start in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. It started really in 1865, right at his emancipation. And the seeds of it came even before that, teachers and businessmen and things like that. Daniel would give his congregation copies of the Chicago Defender, which was at that time illegal in Savannah. The Chicago Defender was an African-American magazine out of Chicago. The mother of the founder of that newspaper is somebody that we're going to visit right at the very end of the cemetery, Flora Sinstack, so we'll be seeing her later. But it's captured a great picture here because etched in the side of it, it says, in memory of our pastor, Reverend D. Wright, died February 7th, 1923. And you can see at the top, he's got a book, a closed book, that's the Bible.
Is he buried above ground?
He is buried, that I'm not sure. With a box vault like this, sometimes that would be the case. It has been later filled in with concrete. But I'm not sure. Sometimes it could be buried underground, and then it has a tomb created above them. There's a few mausoleums that are here within the cemetery where people are placed on niches along the side. But I'm not sure about that.
So it originally would have been dirt and then later covered with?
Possibly. You can kind of see that there's a slight difference. His marker there, which may have been on the ground originally, and then this may have been built up later. So we're going to go just to this corner.
Wright die of natural causes? He was very young.
As far as I know, he did. I didn't check. Often we do have, at least in this early graves, a record of death. But so many things can go wrong, cancer. But I never was able to check his past. This is the grave of John Davis and Clara Davis. Clara was a little older than John. She died at 46 years of age in 1914, and 2 years later, John died in 1916 at 41. John was a member of a lot of different organizations. You can see here he was a member of the Benevolent Protective Order of Elks, the Knights of Pythias, and he was even a Mason. Those organizations were very important for African Americans to have a place to network and share information, build careers. Most of the people that you're going to see here today that are on the tour were often Masons or Elks or others. He loved his wife, and when she passed, he hired a German sculptor named John Waltz to create this model. John Waltz was from Germany, but he studied in Vienna to become quite an accomplished sculptor. When he got to work on a project for the Telfair Museum, creating a statue of Raphael, he came to Savannah to install it, and he discovered that Savannah had a real need for significant sculpture. And so he created, hundreds of grave markers throughout Bonaventure Cemetery, Laurel Grove, and I found at least 7 or 8 here in Laurel Grove South. This picture is of W.W. Law, about 1971 or so, looking at this grave in shambles. He's assessing it to have it repaired, which it was. And over time, more damage came. It being on the corner here, just about a year ago, someone clipped it. And so now it's got to be repaired again. Repairs can be complicated because these are private graves. When you buy a lot, you receive a deed. However, after about 70 years, many lots are considered abandoned. Families move away, families die out. And so eventually, the Department of Cemeteries, the Cemeteries Division, will take over and restore some. So this year we have several projects in Laurel Grove South. Eventually this will be part of that to get restored once again. But it's an absolute beautiful statue. She's holding a lily, looking downwards. It's kind of got a lot of John Waltz's signature details that you would see. Small cherubs, the elaborate lettering of the name. So we're going to swing around the corner here and head up to a grave just on the other.
Wow, that should be fun. Is that going to be at the Morris Center or the Chick-fil-A? A lot bigger. Although I love the Morris Center. Indoors. And my car got used to it. That's how it's used to see. Kind of an area where you feel not too cool about, losing my car. It's pretty kind of fun.
Remember I mentioned John Waltz, who's the sculptor that we just passed by. Well, he also created the ones for Emmanuel K. Love, who was visiting here. There's 2 behind you, the Desvernies. He created those as well. But first I wanted to talk to you about Emmanuel. Emmanuel K. Love was born into slavery. He began preaching at 18 years old. He eventually becomes the pastor of First African Baptist Church, so in 1885 until his death in 1900. He graduated at the head of his class at the Augusta Institute, which would today be Morehouse College. He was the editor of 2 newspapers and wrote the history of First African Baptist Church. He was very influential in the Republican Party, although he wasn't a politician himself. He was a very influential member, and he convinced the Georgia State Legislature to help create a local college, the Georgia State Industrial College for Colored Youth, which today we would call Savannah State University. So he was instrumental in that. Even more so, he got his friend, who he had worked on a newspaper with, Richard K. Wright, to be its first president. And so Richard Wright really helped to make Georgia State Industrial College for colored youth successful today, Savannah State. He was also a founding member of something called the Wage Earners Bank, which was one of the first black banks in the country, and the first one to ever receive over $1 million in deposits. It failed, like many banks did, with the stock market crash in the 1920s. But he was a political advocate, and basically his work foreshadows the civil rights movement in the city. So he's a very, very interesting figure. You should definitely look him up some more. Our next stop is going to be right around the corner over here. Now, did y'all want to go and visit your family?
Yeah.
Well, let's go.
I believe he was on Andrew Marshall. No, Andrew Marshall name is mixed up.
Andrew Marshall's right over here.
Yes, it's over here. And his middle name is Andrew.
Really?
So I was wondering whether there was a connection.
I believe that he might be on our maps. We have the location right on here. So, did any of that seem familiar? Or I guess you never visited? Yeah. Okay, well, he was right around. That should be right around here, and I'll help you.
So Andrew.
No, Pace.
Yeah,
Correct.
so it's up in here. It's up in here.
Absolutely. So it is.
I was saying that's probably not the head stuff.
Yeah. Well, I'll help you locate the exact lot as soon as we can. So.
Okay.
And that
Right,
was your grandfather?
My grand uncle.
Grandma.
My grand aunt. Yeah. And when I did the, it seemed like I don't know whether this is him and
Gotcha.
Andrew Marshall's name.
I just wanted to help her locate a grave here in the cemetery. Today, you can look up burial records on your phone. Many of the graves have specific locations. Some of the older ones don't always. But if you go to the City of Savannah Cemeteries Department, you can look up burial records. And if you do it from your phone, there's even a Find a Grave feature where it'll take you to it with a GPS. It's still pretty new. So quite often if there's not a specific location we can give you, we'll just give you the entrance to the cemetery. But for most grave lots, we have GPS coordinates that will take you within 10, 20 feet of that location.